Hello, hello.
Morning. How are you doing?
Doing okay.
We will wait just another minute or two, let others join, and then we'll get started.
Do we know what topic will be on this Thursday as well? Yet?
So let's pull it up. Today is anomalies. Yep, anomaly detection. And then Thursday will be right sizing.
Okay, thanks.
And then, yep, and then Friday is True Cost Explorer.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And I did in the meeting invite, I did update, there's a SharePoint link to that everyone should have access to, and it's where we're storing all of the recordings for initially. And then also in the meeting invite is the updated list of dates and topics.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. All right, Jeff, you want to take it away?
Let's do it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Like Al said, we're going to be going over anomaly detection today. Let me share here. This one. Window. There we go. All right. So there's really the anomaly detection feature is for cost-based anomaly detection. And what that means is we're looking at the billing export files and we're finding anomalous spend from groups of resources. Now, this is opposed to what some people might think of anomalies as like a burst in usage. So say like CPU usage goes up a ton all of a sudden. Like that might be anomalous, but that's not really what we care about because that doesn't necessarily increase costs, right? Cloudability is a cost platform, and so that's where our focus is. Now, of course, this is useful because we can notice new or increased spending. And that means that if there's some new thing that got turned on, we can catch unintended spending before it balloons, right? And what that really does is it gives us the opportunity to say, does this look right before it gets crazy, right? An anomaly is not something where we need to like panic immediately. It's something where we just need to investigate and find out if it's correct. Now, I'm going to be talking today like I'm talking to you as a FinOps person, right? Now, and that's really the where I want you to put yourself. Put yourself in the shoes of a FinOps practitioner, and think about it like from their perspective, because when someone in that kind of role sees an anomaly, they have to react to it, right? That's our intention from Cloudability, right? We want them to react to that anomaly and to do something. Should trigger something. And to that end, we do have notifications that could be configured through email or PagerDuty. All right, now how does anomaly detection actually work? Well, there are now two types of anomalies. One is kind of what we call service-based. So it looks at service name, account name, usage family, and it just takes those three dimensions and groups all of the resources under those three dimensions, all of the costs, and looks for anomalies that way. Now, the older way, and the way that it was been done for a long time, is in addition to those three things, we add tags and business dimensions. So in those cases, we use 5 tags, 5 business dimensions, and I'm honestly not entirely sure how those 5 are selected. I've heard some kind of conflicting reports. I've heard some say that they are the 5 most filled out business dimensions and tags. I've heard some say that they are kind of there's like some machine learning somewhere that selects those tags and business dimensions. But regardless, there are 5, and we do try to use ones that actually have values. All right. Now, finally, like, how does the anomaly detection actually work? Well, what we tell people, and usually we don't get questioned on this too hard, is that anomalies are triggered when spend for a certain day is 2 standard deviations over the mean. Oh boy, what are standard deviations? Kyle, I made this just for you.
Thank you.
So you may remember like how to take an average, just an arithmetic mean, which is put some fancy sigmas up here, sigmas and moos. But really what this is just saying is that we take up all those numbers, we add them together, and we divide by the total number of data points, right? So very standard grade school average. And then the variance, what we do there is we're just taking the difference of each of those numbers from the mean. So in this particular example, 1 minus 7 is 6. Well, 6 squared is 36. 7 minus 23 or 20 is 13. Squared is 169, right? So on and so forth. And so I went ahead and did the rest of this math last night. And so in this case, I found that we have a standard deviation of 7.28, and so 2 standard deviations then would be 14.56, right? And so this is the kind of math that we could go through to like prove it out. I never would, I just wanted to do this to help remind everyone of your stats class.
The good call out there, Jeff. And actually, I have done this before for customers where I have pulled in, a report where we export the data points and we do run this arithmetic on it.
Yeah.
And it has proven out,
cool.
Believe it or not. So just wanted to note on
that. Yeah. And for what it's worth, I mean, usually the explanation of, well, it's 2 standard deviations above the mean. Most people just accept that, honestly. It's rare for someone to question that.
Can you put into pedestrian terms, like, great, we have this math behind it.
Yeah.
Can you put in pedestrian terms of what is that actually? Great. So it's 2 standard deviations. So 14 above or below, like, like, what does that mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, it is just above, right? We're only looking for cost increases. That's a good call out. Sometimes we will get a question of like, well, does it detect anomalous decreases too? Like, what if something failed? What if something got turned off in error? Nope, we won't find those. This is just for checking increases in cost. And like, I think from a practical perspective, what we're really looking at is, well, this is a pretty obvious bump. In most cases, when you see an anomaly, it's going to seem obvious to you, like, oh, well, yeah, that's an anomaly. That's a big jump. Why did that happen? That won't always be the case. And in fact, I've got an example a little bit later that looks very strange. And I don't have a great explanation for, but I do want to kind of impart upon you that there are kind of our intention here is that these will make intuitive sense, right? You will see the chart for these. In fact, let's go to the chart. You'll see the chart for these and say, oh, yep, that's anomalous. All right. So in this particular case, we had some Azure storage with a usage family of storage. So, this is looking at blob storage specifically. And, a pretty large increase happened just the other day, May 15th. It's now the 17th, right? And of course, we caught this, pretty quickly too, right? I just put this deck together yesterday, so we noticed this pretty quickly, and that's really the benefit, right? We want to do this as quickly as possible. Now, of course, we need to be able to take people through and actually look at all of this and understand what it's for. Now, the metrics of unusual spend and cost total, right? Those just tell us, well, what is the actual effect? How much is it costing me? But then the dimensions are really where I think it's important, because that's what identifies those resources. If you pull up a report, so, there's that view report link on the top right of the chart. That view report link is very important to be able to investigate anomalies. And the way that we use that, the report link is going to have all of these dimensions as filters so that we get exactly this same set of resources. And I think too, let me harp on this for a second. These are sets of resources. Very, very rarely can we even have a single resource that's capable of an anomaly. Now, the reason, you can kind of imagine this, if you only have one resource, say one EC2 instance, well, it's always going to cost the same, right? The instance usage is always going to be the same, because that's how instances work, right? Unless we change the instance type without destroying the instance, then the instance cost is never going to change. But if we have a group of resources, say you have a team and that team has a dozen instances, and then suddenly they spin up 5 GPU instances that cost $100, $1,000 a day or something. Well, suddenly costs are going to jump, and tags then become very important for actually grouping those resources in a cogent way.
And what is this unusual spend here? What does that mean?
Yeah, unusual spend is everything above that 2 standard deviation line, right? So basically what we're saying is, well, we think that anything within 2 standard deviations is normal, right? It's something that we would expect. And anything above that is unusual, unexpected.
Hey, Jeff, what is the period that we're looking at here? So on the 15th, okay, we had this increase, but is it comparing that unusual spend or the 2 times the standard deviation? Is that looking at yesterday, the day before? Is it looking at last Monday and the Monday before that, this day, last month? What is it using to try to compare against?
Great question. And that's something that's a little opaque to us right now. So it's definitely some set of days in the past. It's unclear to me whether or not we're taking any usage patterns into account. So, say you have higher usage on the weekends, usually that's going to just be taken care of, well, by the normal standard deviation rules, right? So we're already expecting a large amount of variance throughout the week, but that might mean that, on a Wednesday, if Wednesday costs go up to weekend levels, then we might not catch that, right? Because I don't think that we are tracking patterns in the same way.
Okay.
But as far as how much we're going back, I don't know. And my example later, I think, will kind of illustrate that better. I would guess at least a week, but I have not proven that out yet.
Okay.
Yeah, what about the cost of, which is happening on a single time cost, happening 15 days or monthly basis? So are we looking at only those costs, or you're looking at the whole trend?
Yeah. So really, we're just looking at usage. We're not looking at recurring charges or one-time charges. So transaction type equals usage should really be the only thing that we're looking at. Another thing worth pointing out here is the metric that we're actually using, which is cost total. We're not using cost adjusted or cost amortized or anything like that. We're just using cost total. So, I mean, even if you have discounts in place, well, the goal here is to find changes in spending. And whether or not you have a discount, the change in spend is going to be true no matter what. So we've just chosen cost total because ultimately it doesn't really matter. Once you change the metric, the anomaly is still going to exist.
One quick question I have, Jeff.
Sure.
How are we deciding the usual spend? So suppose this is for a service. Is there any algorithm we are following behind it?
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, that's really where those two standard deviations come in, right? So we are taking the average of some number of days before this, and then we are finding, just statistically, what is two standard deviations above that average. And then, that's really anything above that is going to be unusual.
So one of the customer asked the question, so suppose if we are showing that EC2 as one of the service where there is anomaly alert we are showing. So they asked me a question that obviously I have 10 instances and I have provisioned 10 instances. So, and you are showing me a anomaly alert. So isn't it that if I have bought the instances to use it at its fullest capacity, for that it should not show the anomaly alert?
Well, I would, without seeing the actual anomaly, it's hard for me to explain. But,
Okay.
My guess would be that, we're seeing more than those 10 instances that they have provisioned, right? And really, that's part of the investigation that we can do. We should just click on that view report link and see what instances are there, right? Add the resource ID dimension to the report and see what instances are actually being included in this anomaly. And that can give us a better idea of what's going on. If there are 20 instances and they're only expecting 10, well, that kind of explains things, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And, being able to do that kind of investigation, especially like live with the customer, I think is like super important, right? To show them like, well, here's how you use Cloudability to investigate a question, right? And anomaly detection is great for asking very specific questions, right? It prompts us to ask those really specific questions. Why is that? Where'd that come from? Can I explain that? Is there some reason for it? Or did someone just turn something on in a dev environment and forget to turn it off? All right. So as a FinOps person, this is really how I implore people to think about anomalies, right? An anomaly should not be cause for panic. It's an opportunity for us to say, something has changed. Was that change expected? Maybe there's a new app, new database, maybe there's a large customer influx that caused auto scaling groups to spin up, right? And we should, the first step, I guess really the first step is like, you might just know offhand that you were expecting this to happen. It's like, oh yeah, I know that a new app was coming online. That's totally expected. I will keep an eye on that cost and make sure it looks okay, but I was expecting an increase. This looks all right, right? Whereas if you're not sure, right, if there's no obvious reason that you were aware of ahead of time, then we can start to investigate using Cloudability. And that means, usually the first step for that is just using that view report link in the details of the anomaly. And that will take us to a report again, that has all of the details, it has all of the information that we might want. And we can see exactly how that anomaly was grouped, how all of the resources were grouped. And then we can change the dimensions. We can change which dimensions we're seeing. We might change the filters a little bit, that kind of thing. And especially we want to look for those tags that can help identify the resource, whether that's the app, the team, the owner, whatever. Because ultimately, the job of a FinOps person is largely communication. We need to go back to the resource owners and tell them, hey, we noticed there was an anomaly. Why is that? What happened? Can you explain this? Is this expected? And of course, if it's expected, great. Then our job is done. We can let them go about their way and we don't have to worry about it. If it's unexpected, well, then we've just probably saved them and ourselves a good deal of money, right? Because they can turn it off or change the process that caused that anomaly in the first place. So either, if the cost was just continuing, which sometimes will happen, if there's a new thing that comes online, it just doesn't get turned off. Well, that new cost is just going to continue day after day. But if it might just be a spike, it might just be like a 1-day spike, and then the cost doesn't continue, but we might still want to look at processes, right? This is an opportunity to look internally and see, well, are the processes in place making something unexpected happen? Can I change those processes or the automation or whatever I have in place to avoid that kind of cost spike in the future? All right. Next, I'm going to go over a quick FAQ, a section that I like to call, yeah, but why though? So one of the most common questions we'll get is like, why did I get a late alert? So what this will show up as is like, you will get an email for spend that happened, sometimes several days ago, or, maybe like a week. And the thing is that this is usually due to corrections in the billing file. All the time, vendors are going to make changes to the billing file for previous days. So Amazon will give us a new cur, and that cur will have data for several days ago. It'll have updates to billing information for, sometimes a week or more, like even like the beginning of the month. And when we scan for anomalies, we're not just looking for like today or yesterday. We're looking for everything. We're scanning the whole thing for anomalies that we haven't caught yet, because those kinds of changes do happen. And if they happen, well, we still need to know about it. But it can be quite confusing because, it's not obvious always. Now, another very common question is, well, I saw a spike in cost, maybe we saw a large increase in usage, and I would have expected an anomaly to show up. Why did it not show up? Why was there no anomaly? And of course, the most common reason is just going to be because the spend was not greater than the 2 standard deviations that would be required to trigger an anomaly. There's also a second requirement for anomalies that is a little bit more nebulous, like, which is basically that it has to be like a certain amount of spend. If usual spend is 50 cents a day and it goes up to $2, we're not going to flag that as an anomaly, even though that, it would be greater than 2 standard deviations, right? Because when the dollar values are that low, around $1 or so, any change is going to be quite significant. And so we tend to ignore those kinds of things. But, sometimes larger things can get missed too. And maybe that's because, well, what if those costs were spread across multiple different accounts? And so maybe if you were to take an aggregate of all of your accounts, the average would be, 2 standard deviations above. But for just any individual account, the increase wasn't quite that dramatic, compared to the variance previously. And it's only when you add up the cost, those new costs for all the accounts that you would see it. But you'll remember, when we looked at the anatomy of the anomaly, the account name was a part of that. The account name is a central part of how we define the resources in an anomaly. So we're only going to be looking at those resources specifically. We can't look at multi-account anomalies. Another one is like, sometimes we will see anomalies that don't look like anomalies. I mean, again, we want them to make intuitive sense. You click into the details and you say, oh yeah, obvious anomaly. I can see why we flag that. And I've got an example right after this will show that. Then the final thing I wanted to mention was, like, we will often get asked, well, how can I sign up other people for alerts, right? Which is to say, I want to sign this other person up for emails that they didn't ask for. And that's not something that I think is like a best practice. It's much better to get that person into Cloudability and have them sign up themselves, right? Because then they have some implicit buy-in, right? They are asking for those emails, and so they're going to be more likely to respond to them. If they just start randomly getting anomaly emails that they don't know what they're for or why they're getting them, I don't think people are going to respond very well to that. But we do have PagerDuty as well, right? So if you have a PagerDuty integration, well, then you can set up PagerDuty, and that will alert, well, whoever is on PagerDuty, right? Any other common questions people have run across? Maybe we can answer those too.
I have
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, please.
So one of the customer kind of said that the algorithm which we using for anomaly detection is like AWS is much better, and they're able to detect anomaly in a better way and compared to ours. So I did not had any question. I asked him to share the instance where he felt the same. And one of the thing he highlighted is the reservations, right? So one of the instances he highlighted is there was a BigQuery reservation, which did not show as anomaly in our tool, whereas it showed in AWS, and they were able to save almost 30K on that.
Interesting.
Yeah, AWS's version is, you can say better and worse. And the reason being is that with AWS, you actually have to set up the boundaries for which you want the alerts to come through. So he must have set a lower threshold in AWS, and Google has one that's somewhat similar. This is 100% out of the box with Cloudability, right? That the user has no, literally they plug in their data and it starts working. So it's a bit, back and forth in terms of what is quote unquote better. The other thing that we do that I think is a little bit quote unquote better is, we include these tags and business mappings by default, which gives you a lower granularity, from the get-go. So sorry to interrupt there, Jeff, but I've had a couple of experiences with that, and those are the kind of trade-offs, if you will, between the two products.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Cloudability is something that's automatic. We don't have to worry about setup. Of course, there is a trade-off there in that it's not as configurable. Now, just for your information, we are thinking about changes to how we produce anomalies, in that we're thinking about having more user configuration. I haven't seen anything like specific from the PMs, but they are thinking about that. And if you have customers with requests, I would highly encourage you to put in product enhancement requests, right? Those are really important so that the PMs know what to prioritize. And I know a lot of customers ask for stuff around anomaly detection, but I don't think that all of those are making it into PFRs.
I have two questions that
Sure.
somehow related, and I think one was mentioned by a customer, right? So I think you mentioned that we detect anomalies by days, right? I guess like days a week.
Yep.
Do we also track anomalies like by time of the month or whatever, like, or even in a quarter? And I'll explain why, because that was mentioned by a customer. A lot of the customers, they have like end of month or whatever business day,
Right.
whatever X processes, specifically around like backups and storage. So in our case, if we don't do it, then it will show up as an anomaly, right?
Yep.
So that was my first question. And then the second question is related to that. In case it will, can I mark something or make a threshold for specific anomalies? It will not appear again like every month, right? Like on whatever, like business days 20, when I use my storage and I run my storage and I do a bunch of backups, and then it will show up as an anomaly to investigate every time.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, again, we don't have that much configuration power. So I can't change what classifies as an anomaly. And I'm not aware of any like, monthly trends that we keep track of or that kind of thing. So I think it's totally possible that we would have monthly increases that we would expect that would still show up as anomalies, right? Just because cloudability is missing that extra context.
There is.
Sorry, Kyle, go ahead.
I was going to say, anomalies do work with views and as well as notifications.
Yes.
So, if you do have a customer who wants to exclude or include particular data points, like you're mentioning, Anton, hey, every time on the 20th, or whatever it is, they know that there's a jump. They can set a view to say, exclude this particular subset of data and assign that to the particular anomaly and set your threshold to whatever, spend threshold, whatever you want. So there is configuration in terms of the alerts, but not necessarily what is detected.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I was planning on going over alerts a little bit more in app. I didn't include that much in the deck, but alerts are an important part of like actually using anomaly detection. And in particular, like Kyle said, using views with those alerts, because then we can choose, be a little bit more picky about what types of resources make it into the anomaly. That's the major lever that we have for configuration. All right.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
Anything else?
There's been a couple of questions lately about now that people are finding out Azure data comes in later, like usually like 25 hours later, depending on timing. That relates back to that other topic we had the other day. And then so their question after that was like, well, then how is that good for anomaly detection? Like, how are they supposed to get responsive anomaly detection? We've had that like come up a couple of times on support cases, and
Yeah.
we weren't sure what to say to that.
Well, I mean, finding an anomaly 25 hours later is still better than finding it a week later, right? The point of anomaly detection and cloudability is that we find it as soon as we receive the billing file. If it takes a little while, well, it just takes a little while. There's not really much that we can do to increase that speed.
Do we even position the tool as kind of like a whatever, like a real-time monitoring tool, or more like you can detect anomaly that mostly in span, right? That's to avoid it in the future, not to kind of like a watchdog to detect any kind of like bizarre usage.
Yeah, certainly. So I think that that's a really good way to use anomaly detection, right? To notice things and to actually change your processes, right? To change how things work. That way you don't have that same problem in the future. Absolutely. Anybody else have anything?
As TAMs, what are the most common like things that customers ask about or have mistakes with in regards to this that we should know about in support?
What do you mean by mistake?
Well, just say you've given these examples here. I see a spike in cost wise or anything else like that they might bring up to support, and it's just like, no, that's just how, two standard deviations.
Yeah.
Like customer stuff like that, or
Yeah, I think the most common ones that I come through, if that makes sense. Anyways, number one is if the vendor corrects the spend.
Yep.
Right.
You know, and unfortunately, we don't have, you know, the only way we can actually track that if someone takes a screenshot and then, you know, we compare it and it's like, well, you know, unfortunately, it was an anomaly when it came through, and that is a good thing, right? We detected it, and that's how we position it. Number two is, you know, Jeff mentioned it for sure. He said, well, if the spend is too low, and I've heard this two ways. I do know it exists. So if the spend is, I've heard it's under 1% of total spend, and or it's basically under $1. So say I spend, you know, 50 cents a day for the last month, and all of a sudden it peaks to $2. Like, that's an anomaly for sure. But there is somewhere in the logarithm, and unfortunately we haven't gotten a 100% solid answer, but somewhere in there is basically a threshold. And so, you know, if a customer expects one, you know, that's the second one I've seen. And then Jeff also pointed out, like, this, and this is key, is it is total cost or cost total, and it is usage only. So, you know, customers will say, well, you know, I got a credit, or I have a discount, or yada, yada, yada. The point is that this is particularly based on actual, you know, dollar usage. And so that's what I've seen, at least.
Yep, exactly right. All right, one more slide, and then I want to take a minute to look at something in Cloudability itself. So this is a case where I don't know why there's an anomaly here. This doesn't really make sense to me, right? Unless we're only counting these past few days instead of this whole time period. But yeah, we have like this tiny little anomaly that does not, you know, considering this hump the week before, does not look that weird. But here it is anyway. And this is the sort of thing where we will get questions, right? People will ask, well, why is that? Why is that considered an anomaly? It's like, well, magic, black magic. I don't have a good answer. And I would love to hear if you do have a better answer than that. Yeah, that's what I thought. So it's a hard question to answer, right? You know, like, it's not obvious. Whereas in other cases, we try to make it, you know, usually they're pretty intuitive. And, you know, we could say, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I mean, you know, maybe just it is taking a week's worth of usage into account. And that's all that it's considering for the anomaly, right? So that's my best hypothesis at the moment to explain this. But just looking at the chart, you know, like it would make intuitive sense that we're taking all of this data, all like I think it's like 20 days that show up here before the anomaly. We're taking all of that into account when that's just obviously not the case. So
do we have any,
Mhm.
sorry, do we have any documentation that would explain at least high level how the algorithm works? 7 days, 20 days, I mean,
yeah, not much. We typically have considered this to be kind of a black box and have been very opaque with customers in the past about how exactly it works. I would be totally open. You know, I would love it if we were to expose more documentation internally and externally about how this works, right? Why do we need to hide that from our customers? I think, honestly, part of the reason we hide it is because you know, the algorithm is not quite as sophisticated as people might expect it to be. You know, like there's not some like special machine learning trying to like figure out patterns and use that to determine where an anomaly is. No, I mean, it's just statistics, right?
Yeah, and maybe that is fine. I mean, my only kind of like from my experience with customers, right, when something like that works, right, and let's say that's working like most of the time, right, but then when you can't explain some stuff like a
Yep.
couple of times, they just stop trusting it, right? They're saying if it's not working there, then maybe it's not working in other places, right?
Sure. Yep. Yeah, and that's a concern for me too, right? And I've certainly run into that kind of thing where it's like, I don't understand why this is happening, and usually I can direct their attention somewhere else to something that does make sense. But every now and then they'll get stuck on this weird thing that doesn't make sense, and they will get kind of hooked on it, or find it to be a problem. So that's something that we just kind of have to guide them away from where we can.
And the original makers of anomaly detection, unfortunately, due to attrition, we've lost the experts in per se. So this isn't definitely something nice to have in terms of more to documentation, more color, which I think we'll get to. But right now we have to kind of have talk tracks around it.
Yep. Yep. And hopefully this session will help with exactly that, help your own understanding and help you be able to talk with people. All right. Let's see. Let me switch here. Oh, here's that same anomaly in cloudability that we were just looking at. And yeah, I mean, again, my best explanation is that we're just taking these 7 days into account for the mean, and that's what's determining the standard deviations. So definitely it looks a little strange, but there we have it. Now, again, I just want to reiterate, I could click on this view report thing and go and investigate this some more, but like, I don't actually have any more context to figure out, why this is happening. And I would probably have to go, just figure out, well, who owns these, who's responsible for VPC, and maybe they can explain this usage, and maybe I would just decide, it's $67. I don't care, right? It's not important to me, and that's okay. But I do want to kind of reiterate the importance of alerts. So whenever we take people through anomaly detection, I always encourage them to set up an alert like live on the call with us, right? So set a dollar threshold if it makes sense, right? So if you are a larger company, maybe you don't care about these $32 anomalies, these or even like these $50 anomalies. Maybe you want only things above $100 or above $200, right? This 500 there is just an example. You can certainly choose whatever dollar amount you like. Now, the most important part though is the view that comes with this, right? And so that view is going to determine what kinds of resources or which anomalies specifically trigger that alert to happen. It does not change. I want to be very clear. Setting a view here doesn't change which anomalies get generated in the first place, right? So no matter what views I set up in my alerts, this list is going to stay the same. All it affects is the alerts that I actually receive in my inbox. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. But regardless, this again is like the major lever that people have to change how they interact with and interface with anomalies, right? Because most people don't want to be checking this page every day. They would rather just get some kind of a notification about it. So that's what this is for.
And by the way, this page of like alert, like the total list, is it exportable?
Nope. There is an API that we've documented for anomaly detection. So people can do it that way. And like, I've heard of people making like Slack integrations from the anomaly detection API.
Yeah,
but
because I would assume, like you said, right, like some of the smaller ones nobody cares about. They would set a threshold like for whatever, like $1,000 and more. But then like once a month, right, I would analyze it, right, because it can be like pretty significant.
Yep.
but then you'll take it outside probably, right, for more robust investigation.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it really depends on like the size of your organization. If you're only spending $1,000 a day, well, $30 anomaly can be quite significant.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah,
But most of the organizations that spend $1,000 a day, I mean, they won't
Yeah.
acquire credibility to begin with.
I mean, I've worked with plenty of customers that only spend $1,000 a day.
Ah, really? Okay.
Yeah, and of course they are fairly early on in their cloud journey, and usually they do have plans for expansion, and growth. But I don't think it's $1,000 a day, $30,000 a month, right? 36 or $360,000 a year. It's quite a bit. And certainly well worth it to have a window into your spending. The earlier the better, in my opinion. And that's part of why our pricing model is based on the amount of spend that's coming through. That way we can make it affordable for people that have less spent. All right. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks, folks. It was great talking with you all, and we will talk with you more soon.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.